for the Women's Refugee Commission. Huge apologies for the delay in getting started. You're obviously familiar with the technical challenges that we are all having these days, and today we've had some more than usual. So huge apologies, but thank you for your patience and for joining us today for this first dialogue on humanitarian organizations and gender transformative change, fit for purpose. This is the first dialogue, and it is hosted very kindly by Canada, the Interagency Standing Committee Gender Reference Group, OCHA, Oxfam, and the Women's Refugee Commission. And we really wanted to have this first dialogue because there are two studies that have come out recently that are very pertinent to this question. The first is the Interagency Humanitarian Evaluation on Gender Equality and Equality of Women and Girls out of the Interagency Standing Committee. And the second is the Women's Refugee Commission White Paper on Gender Transformative Change in Humanitarianism, a view from the inside. And we will try and paste those links into the chat shortly. I see there's a message saying that somebody can't hear me. I really hope someone else can hear me, or am I just talking to nobody right now? I see in the chat.
Can hear you.
What? Well,
we can hear you.
Some
of us can hear, and some participants can't hear. So I guess this is being recorded, right?
It is recorded, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Proceed.
Apologies for that, for the sound, but we are recording. Of course, as I say that, those people who don't have sound are not going to hear me say that. Apologies for that as well. We will try and make sure that we send that out to everyone later. So as I said, this is the first of 3 dialogues. The next one will be in the autumn, but really we wanted to have a conversation to really see what should we be doing in the humanitarian sector to make sure that organizations are fit for purpose. We will be doing a first introduction with Her Excellency Leslie Norton, who is the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations and the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. And then we'll also be hearing from 3 panelists. Hopefully our 3rd panelist we now will be able to get in via another way. Let me first introduce Ambassador Norton, who began her career in the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and then worked for many years at the Canadian International Development Agency in a range of positions in the Africa, Asia, and multilateral branches. She served in Bangladesh as well as at the Permanent Mission of Canada in Geneva, where I had the pleasure of meeting her many years ago. She's also been the Director General of the International Humanitarian Assistance Bureau, the Director General of Southern and Eastern Africa Bureau, and was the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Sub-Saharan Africa branch before she was appointed as Canada's Ambassador to Geneva on those things I said before, UN and the Conference on Disarmament in August 2019. I'm also going to introduce our other 3 panelists before I hand the floor to Ambassador Norton for her opening remarks. We've got Anila Noor, who is the founder of New Women Connectors, which is a movement striving for mainstreaming the unheard voices of migrant and refugee women living across Europe, and is a co-founder of the Global Independent Refugee Women Leaders, or GIRL, and a member of the Global Refugee-Led Network, or the GRN. She's a refugee activist and a researcher based in the Netherlands who works with different institutions as a consultant on designing engagement projects related to inclusion and diversity. Our other panelist is Onusanthi Pillai, who you may not be able to see, unfortunately, but hopefully you can, but she's been having some connection issues. She is the Global Women's Protection Advisor for ActionAid International and is on the Global Steering Committee of the Feminist Humanitarian Network. She's an uncompromising feminist who works as a technical specialist, content advisor, and program manager in national and international humanitarian and development sectors. She's worked as an advisor in Southern, East, and West Africa and spent time in India on interfaith conflict. She was seconded to the UN and worked in a number of places as well. We've then got, finally, last but not least, Marta Royo, who is the Executive Director of Pro Familia in Colombia. She has been working there, which is Pro Familia, she's been there since 2012. It's Colombia's longest standing NGO that provides, protects, and advocates for sexual and reproductive rights and services. There, she's been able to achieve a lot of political and social transformation aimed at improving the status of women and girls in Colombia, including leading legislature on the national policy on sexuality and sexual and reproductive rights, and making sure these rights are recognized for people with disabilities and eliminating barriers that prevent women from accessing safe abortions. We've got an excellent panel today, and I am very honored to be part of this fabulous group of women as we delve into this conversation on humanitarian organizations and gender transformative change. Are we fit for purpose? And with that, Ambassador Norton, I'm going to hand over to you, please.
Thanks, Manisha, and nice to be here with you all today. And I really hope that all are safe and healthy. And many thanks to all the participants who've called in. I hope you're able to hear us. This is the first, as Manisha said, of an exciting series of 3 dialogues on gender transformative change in the humanitarian sector. I'd also like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to provide opening remarks on behalf of the Government of Canada. I'm delighted to be able to participate for 2 reasons. First, because of the close alignment with the Canadian government's feminist foreign policy and the priority it has placed on supporting gender-responsive humanitarian action, and also due to my own personal and professional interest in seeing these issues advanced. So Canada, through our feminist international assistance policy, has set an ambitious target for 95% of bilateral international development assistance to either integrate or target gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls by 2021-22. So currently Canada is on track to meeting its target. We're currently at 94%. And there have been a lot of challenges along that road, but we're really pleased to be almost there. During our term as the global lead of the call to action on protection from gender-based violence, we work to find ways to advance gender equality through increased support for local actors, particularly women's organizations, by ensuring commitments in this regard were included in the 2021-2025 roadmap, and by welcoming local organizations into the call to action network. So Canada has also made significant financial investments to directly support local women's organizations. For example, we have a really interesting program called the Women's Voice in Leadership, as well as our Equality Fund. I'm also delighted to be able to participate today as a close follower of efforts to advance gender equality in the humanitarian sector since the early days of my career. As mentioned by Manisha, I had spent a lot of time at Canadian CEDA, the former CEDA, as part of the humanitarian team in the late 90s. I served, as she'd mentioned, as humanitarian counselor here in Geneva, and I'm a repeat offender coming back now. And I was also director and director general, as she mentioned, of the humanitarian program for many, many years. So over that time, I've seen some improvements, but feel that progress has been too slow, sometimes frustratingly so, I have to admit. The interagency humanitarian evaluation on gender equality does point to some good progress that's been made. It also shows that there's much more that needs to be done and provides some really good practical recommendations of making further progress. The Women's Refugee Commission's study on gender equality is also an excellent complement to the ISC evaluation. It complements the pragmatic recommendations in the evaluation by encouraging us to look explicitly at power relationships within the communities we work with and the power relationships embodied in our own organizational cultures. It suggests that the reason why change has been slow is that there are no technical fixes for political problems. Organizational culture also needs to change. This requires committed leaders and systems for accountability. The challenges ahead are complex, and the conclusions of the Women Refugee Commission's paper in particular are challenging and difficult. But it is by questioning ourselves as well as engaging in dialogue, such as in this event, that we can accelerate progress. So thank you again for the opportunity to launch the discussion today. And I look forward to hearing from the expert panelists and the conversation that will follow. So back to you, Manish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And apologies for those who are unable to hear. I don't know why I keep saying that they can't hear me, but we are recording and I apologize about that. That was excellent, Leslie. As you said, we have seen a lot of efforts, but progress has been frustratingly slow. So this, I think, is an opportunity for us to hear from some experts as to what do we need to do to make things move faster. So really excited to hear the answers that we'll have. Before I ask my first question, I just want to make sure, Anu, that we can hear you. Or can you hear me? Because you're the first one I'm asking a question to.
Okay, Anu, Manisha is going to direct a question to you now. Let's just see if you can hear each other. Okay.
I can hear you very faintly. Can you turn the volume up on your phone?
I'm speaking right into this thing here.
That works perfectly.
Okay, that's good.
Can you hear me, hopefully? I'm going to just ask the question, and then if not, Jacqueline, you can do the interpretation for me, please.
Okay.
So for this first round of questions, the big question really is, do you think humanitarian organizations are fit for the purpose of gender transformative change? And if so, why?
Can you just repeat the question? Is the humanitarian system fit for gender transformative change?
Yes.
So why?
If
Yes.
so, why or why not? Yes, that's the question.
I think, thanks for the question, Manisha, and sorry about all this technical glitches, but let's see if we can beat it with our innovation and creative ways of doing things. What I'd like to talk about is, go a little bit back into a more political analysis of why I think that where the humanitarian system is sitting at the moment. So I think what we're seeing is that COVID-19 what it's done is lifted the veil to reveal all of our pathologies. And the humanitarian system, in my opinion, is definitely one of those pathologies. Since the end of the Cold War, if you think about it, it's not a secret since 1991 that the world is dominated by a neoliberal capital marketplace. What we don't acknowledge or discuss enough is that in this marketplace, profits and money are of such importance that it's a standard that we use to value just about everything, to such an extent that there's less and less space to value personal and social qualities such as humility, collaboration, care, compassion, or helping each other. So the humanitarian system, which was established as a way to help war-affected Europe after the Second World War, is also part of this marketplace and is driven by the need for funding and shaped by the meeting of donor requirements. The history is important if we are to understand the predicament we find ourselves in now, and if we're asking ourselves, is this fit for purpose for gender transformative change? Think about the fact that although we established the Universal Declaration for Human Rights in 1948, we didn't establish a UN Human Rights Organization until 1993. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that this market-driven system has, since the end of the Cold War, been increasingly pressured to respond to more and more crises from conflicts and disasters with the cumulative challenges of climate change. Yet this global humanitarian system has not been able to transform itself from its colonial racist moorings to meet the challenges of today and move out of the marketplace, become more centered on people rather than money. It is still dominated by the experts from the global north. It's rampant with sexual harassment and sexual misconduct allegations, with competing agencies who fight and jostle for funding, with less and less compassion towards the affected populations, and most importantly, leaving us with the question as to why some humanitarian organizations continue to exist even after they complete their mandates. The question, therefore, is, can such a system, which is based on profit and power, and which is fundamentally patriarchal if you think of its militarist origins, its structure, its militarist structure and militarist way of working, can it in its current form align with gender transformative approaches and integrate feminist principles and ways of working? Gender transformative approaches, in fact, let me be clear that I mean feminist approaches, meaning moving beyond the technical fixes and the technical advisors and experts that we have today, and moving into where we have an overarching aim to move beyond individual self-improvement among women and towards transforming the power dynamics and structures that serve to reinforce gendered inequalities and the oppression of women and girls. The challenge here is that this system is still based on colonial and racist philosophies and approaches to conduct the responses. So if you think about the fact that the current aid from the global north to the global south has two strands. One is to provide assistance and training to governments to increase security and fight against extremism. And the other is to educate and fund the civil society groups in the same countries to fight for human rights. This is an oxymoron, and we pretend not to understand it. So if we are to bring feminist transformative change into humanitarian work, this oxymoronic practice by the governments from the global north has to stop. This can only be done when the international humanitarian agencies push back their own governments on the two strands mentioned and push back boldly to support transformative change. This should be their role, but instead they step in, take up leadership roles that belong to communities in crisis-affected contexts, rob them of power, recognition, and resourcing from the organizations and individuals that are on the front lines of humanitarian response. We know that international organizations leading the work and defining the terms on which it is done is patriarchal and it's colonial. Yet it continues to happen, in part because this is the role that NGOs have always played, and it's a deeply problematic way of working. So if we know that transformation comes from within, in that light, the global humanitarian system has to conduct a lot of soul searching and become part of the solution. The way it is now, I don't think it's fit for purpose of bringing about a feminist or gender transformative change. This is a serious analysis. And if we are to take this analysis seriously, we must be honest with ourselves. Let's understand that a large part of the problem is within the humanitarian system. And unless we understand the problem, how can we solve it? So I'll just stop there. I've said a lot. And maybe come back to it when we talk about what we can do about it.
Super. Thank you very much, Anu. And hopefully you came across loud and clear for me. I hope others did. We still have lots of people with technical problems, but we are going to record and hopefully we can share the notes. Anila, I wanted to come to you. I mean, at the end of what Anu said there, based on her analysis, she has said very clearly that it's not yet fit for purpose. What's your view? Are humanitarian organizations ready for transformative change, or what needs to be addressed from your perspective, please?
Thank you, Manisha, and thank you so much for inviting me, because where I came from Pakistan, living in South Asia, working in a gender change in Pakistan, and similar, having the same experience of barriers in Europe, we can say it's still a long way to go. We really need to realize how work we are doing, and I really want to add on what Anu said, like it's not even about shifting or doing the reforms, it's about realizing actually what we are doing. And I really thankful for Women Refugee Commission and Jacqueline for putting this paper, because sometimes we as a refugee representative, as a woman of color, feel block out. We do not feel when we are speaking. Humanitarian reformers, UN agencies, they are taking our voice as a seriously. They are taking our reflection as a critical approach, and that's why it helps us when it's coming within, as this kind of white papers, as this kind of reflection from within organization, which is providing a platform to connect the voices which we are saying. We are flagging the barriers, and is helping us how we can actually right now change this whole humanitarian system, which is somehow still just remaining as a business. So how we can be sure this is not a business, but actually this is based on humanitarian, and also to understand like what is feminist approach, to understand what is intersectionality. I was so happy when I was reading. I didn't felt like Jacqueline or Women's Refugee Commission or someone other as a multi-stakeholder, they are writing this paper. I just felt this is what I saw from like my more than 25 years of my engagement in development sector. Either I was in South Asia or in Europe, I felt this is the witness, and I really want to see how people who are in this panel, our allies who are in this panel, how we are reflecting within ourselves, because this is an opportunity, as COVID gave us a moment to pause and to rethink, and we saw everything is possible if we could put our life online, if we can put our services like airplanes being stopped, and if we could say, oh, we need to have put the mask and we have the distance, if we this becoming a normal, then if we put our heart, our mind, we can rechange, we can rethink. And think this is a moment which we can say is a moment to understand if we are talking about gender intersectionality. So we need to understand what's definition of your gender definition. What is my understanding and definition of intersectionality? It's not that wrong or right. Because coming from South Asian culture, living and working in a Muslim society, my gender or feminist approach is I will be independent to make my own decision. But these decisions, when I move to European countries, is when I'm like, okay, I need to have more understanding, to more information, to explore what can opportunities are there. And it's really I love to see when in this paper when they're saying, okay, feminist approach, sometime in Europe they're thinking, okay, it's like only for women, only for gender communities. No, feminist approach is like more inclusive approach. How we can bring, it's not like add on some kind of decoration or take the mark or follow that trend. And it's happening, unfortunately. I feel so much sometimes frustrated, disappointed living in Europe. Like if it's happening in European countries, if it's happening in European policy, then you can imagine people who are living in Africa, people working on, in MENA region, in South Asia region, in Asia, Central Asia, who have already so much infrastructure problem, who have so systematic problem, then how you can go and work there about to bring this change within yourself. And what happened in these countries, developing countries, we love to say, okay, we need to give our support to global south. But what happens when INGOs, my apologies to IGOL NGOs, but I have this influence of Dutch to direct, so I will be direct and open, because here we are trying to reflect and we are learning from each other's work environment. So what these donor agencies, big donor agencies goes, and they say, oh, we are here to help local actors, we are here to help them. But they are not helping them, they are making them more dependent. They are making them more cut into their own theories, their own approach, their own projects to meet the deliverables. They are not thinking we are creating impact or we are shaking their culture. There are so many very recent example which I saw, which is, I felt this is not a humanitarian response. We are again bringing colonization, we are again bringing capitalism into the practice. Unconsciously, we are reproducing this all racism, this all, kind of barriers which we saw in 50s or 40s or even 90s. And still in 2021, we are reproducing them. Manisha, feel free to stop me. Otherwise, I have like
just
long.
about to. I was just about to, because we are running short on time.
Yes, yes. But yeah, there's so many things I can add on, because this is the work like from my heart. So yeah.
Okay. I'll come back to you on the second round of questions, but I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear from Marta and get to that second round. But thank you, Anila. I think you've raised some really important points. And I know that you've picked on INGOs there, but I'd love to also hear on the second round, what are some of the other factors? Because it's not just INGOs. We've also got UN agencies, donors. So for the second round, I want to hear a little bit more of those reflections as well. Marta, based on your experience, what do you think are some key organizational factors for achieving gender transformative impacts?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Good. I think that I want to start by the end by saying that we definitely had to go through internal transformative processes in order to transform the context in which we operate. And that includes analyzing our work within the humanitarian field from a gender perspective. We are investing a lot on the outside. Are we investing on ourselves? We talk a lot about empowering women, about gender equality. Are we empowered leaders of the organizations we belong to? Which missions are serving people? And this takes us always to the same question. What innovations need to happen in order to achieve the changes that we all want to see reflected when a humanitarian crisis happens? In the case of Familia, we opted on transforming ourselves internally in all areas, so we could positively affect it and help the affected communities. As the leader of Pro Familia, an organization that has been around for almost 60 years now, we started by asking ourselves some very hard questions. They were painful. Are we still relevant to the country, to the people? Are we complying with our mission? Are we creating the change we want to see? How are we achieving this? Are we connected to the new context and needs of the population, to the humanitarian crises that are happening out there? Are we truly, profoundly in touch with the problems and hardships they face? Are we just working to receive a salary, or are we here because we believe in what we do and that by doing so, we can make a difference in someone else's life? And that's when we realized that we have been very focused on the outside, on the huge problems out there, that we have stopped looking at the inside. And that's when change started happening. And I have to say, good, thrilling change. Painful, yes, but still good. Some of the concrete actions that we took was, there is this old proverb that says, you cannot give what you do not have. So after a profound diagnosis, we designed a 360 strategy that touched the whole organization. Our work, we questioned our beliefs, our own paradigms, the people that we had in charge of these operations. So we implemented a comprehensive leadership program that consists of workshops, lectures, training, reading, from which around 250 employees of Pro Familia benefit each year. Our annual performance evaluation includes a whole set of competences that are directly related to the characteristics a Pro Familia leader must have. This program has been going on now for almost 8 years and is mandatory. And one of the commitments as a leader is to cascade down the learning so that all the employees benefit. From the point of view of internal processes, we have to ensure that we have the right people in the right place. That is, people with, yes, technical knowledge, but also with the leadership competences that are needed in order to truly comprehend and work with the projects that we develop throughout the year. And this includes a high sensitivity, accountability, commitments, and of course, the technical knowledge. So we also redesigned our whole organizational culture so that we make sure that all these principles are included and and that we see a truly adherence of every single employee that works in the organization. We see culture as the leverage for achieving the strategic objectives of any company, organization, movement, or project. That's like what gets us together, that mission around the cultural. And if we want a diverse, inclusive, human, and sensitive environments, we have to work. So our human talent, our human resources really acts accordingly. Thus the result will be a more inclusive one. This path that we have traveled, it has taken some time. It has meant investing in ourselves, in time, resources, but also commitment to the programs. But it has, the change that he has enabled us to create has been amazing. And just to give you an example, thanks to this, we were able to develop programs that truly fit the needs of the population. And these programs are built with them. And every year we go back to the local and work with the local organizations, including migrant humanitarian population, sit down with them and listen to what they have to say about the way we do things, about our employees. And I know that this means, you have to be humble, you have to listen, you have to open up your listening qualities, because some of the things that you hear sometimes, they are not nice, or they are, they complain. But I think that's the only way through which you can really grow, learn, and truly comply with what we are supposed to do, with what our mission is, which is bringing well-being to the people that we work with.
Super. Thank you so much, Marta. And it's great to hear you talking about the investment that you've made to really transform the organization and really invest in the people working in the organization so that they are better able to understand what it is that those you're working with need and expect, but also taking those complaints on board and really being able to transform. Based on some of the challenges that you heard from both Anu and from Anila, do you have any experiences that could shed some light on ways to address or overcome some of those challenges that they've highlighted?
I think that, again, we have to, as organizations at every single level, if you are in a multilateral cooperation agency or at the EU, United Nations level, I mean, the purpose that we all have is the same. But I think we really, I mean, and this exercise, I think, is a wonderful start, and the documents that have already coming out, because we have an obligation to ask ourselves, how are we doing things? We have to be able to reflect on that. And we also have to be able to reflect on, do we have the systems, but the people? You know, just because you have the technical knowledge, that doesn't mean that you have the sensitivity and the understanding to truly match together all the knowledge that you have gathered through university and experience with delivering a gender perspective program on the field. I mean, it's not enough to evaluate and to reflect that we have the best technical people on board. We have to ask about those leadership competences that are needed nowadays in able to work on the field. And that's, I mean, and we have to listen to the communities. We have to listen to what they're saying, because many times we design programs that we say, oh, this is a wonderful program. We give all the resources, but they are not talking, those programs, those solutions are not truly talking to the needs of what is happening especially under a humanitarian crisis. I mean, we are totally unattached, you know, and we have to change that. And I think it starts by asking ourselves the hard questions and seeing what needs to be changed internally.
Super. Thank you so much, Marta. And I think that really, as you said, also the way that you've changed, you really had to think about and reflect on, was the organization doing the right things? Was it still fit for purpose? And I think the way that you approach that, and the way that you just talked about the need to be able to have that sensitivity and understanding, are very important ways for that transformative change to come about. Anila, given your analysis, what do you think is most needed to address some of the challenges in terms of moving forward?
Yes, thank you, Manisha. I will reflect again our own experience as a refugee-led woman, refugee-led, you know, double, triple identities. We felt there's so much going on. People are feeling there's a need to change, but actually how we can face the organizational structure, and also when people take you only as a refugee woman led to decorate the table, to just tick the box, is, sorry to say again, is happening, is still happening. So I think there's a UN agencies or INGOs, they are really sometimes trying to help us as a new emerging organization living either in Europe or other part of, or working on a global level. When we as a refugee woman led are trying to fit in the spaces, there are so many even capacity we want to learn. We want to learn how to speak these UN agencies or humanitarian actors who are there in the field, in the business from last few decades, what kind of languages they are talking about, what kind of terms they are using. And we do have our own experience, our lived experience as a knowledge, and how we match them. You know, this is really needed, how we can match them before understanding, no, this is our criteria. If you have fit this criteria, this requirement, then you can apply for this funding. And if you are not getting any funding. We really need to invest on strengthening, on ongoing current movements, especially which COVID creates so many a woman-led organization who are really in the field, on the local ground. They are helping, and they are serving to the community. They are becoming more resilient, and we need to understand their resilience. And instead of coming up with new approach, with new project, how we can add into their ongoing work, how we can stand as allies, as a true allies, to respect their need, their response, and their way of work. Because this is really important when we are talking about transformation right now, how we can see as an organization on a larger level and an organization on a local level. Actually, what everyone wants in the end, we all want to have a gender equal, inclusive social justice being served in our humanity, in our community, in our house, in our country, in our region. So that's what we are working in our own capacity, in our interest, and that's why we really need to invest. We really need to see how. I really love the quote in the report. If you go and see the report on page number 12, like organizational barriers, really we are what we hire. So it was so catchy for me to reflect like, wow, it's so true. Like as a role model in a UN agencies or INGO, if you feel there's no people look like you, honestly, and who do not speak your language, and there are so many culture difference, how they can understand your difficulties. It sometimes helps you if you are coming from the same understanding to unpack the barriers and to really understand the problems and the solution. I think we are talking about so much gap all the time. We are talking about problems and the gaps, but we are not understanding even to start on the word of how. How and who can have the power to make the decision and resources to make this implementation to be really inclusive. Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much, Anila. And I think you really highlighted some of those important points that come out in the paper, but that also we need to be picked up as we move ahead and really looking at how do we unpack those barriers and who and how do we bring that about and who are the staff that we have in our organizations as well. Anu, I think your audio is working, so I hope you will be able to maybe even see you. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we can always hope. But maybe I can ask you, and I know we have a couple of people who've wanted questions, so we'll try to get to those. But from your perspective, Anu, and based on that sort of historical analysis that you did, that you told us about before, given those challenges, what's the best way forward so that we can have that gender transformative change within humanitarian organizations?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yay.
And see me?
Can't
No?
see you. Oh, yes, I can see you. Sorry, there you are. Yes, sorry. Wonderful.
All right. Great. I think that, based on what everyone has said, and I think the other speakers have said very similar things about transformation and what needs to happen in terms of changing the way that we work in order to make it, bring about a gender transformative society. We need to build the capacity of the international humanitarian agencies where each individual person must take responsibility for changing themselves and not continue to uphold the status quo. We've heard from Anila, some of the things that she's experienced with international agencies where, we are dealing with so much discrepancy and so much imbalance. The people must take individual responsibility to not to continue to uphold our status quo and perpetuate the system, and each international organization must review its strategy and ways of working to ensure that its staff are committed to a new way of working, a commitment to feminist principles, and deeply entrench that within the culture of the organization. I think working in a different way, an eco-feminist way that acknowledges the oppression of women and how that is linked with the degradation of the environment, we can develop a consciousness of that and the wisdom to know that sometimes the best humanitarian response is not to respond. So, to understand that the international humanitarian organizations are not the most important element in a response. So this requires humility in order to acknowledge the power of the frontline responders, or the power and the wisdom of the communities. So in many cases, we need to change the moorings from which the humanitarian system is sitting on, the philosophical moorings of this Western bias, reductionist way of thinking, and look at the feminist principles of collaboration, of compassion, of care, of humility. One of the things I really want to highlight is that the recommendation of deploying more gender experts to emergencies, to me, is really just not the answer. I myself have worked as a regional representative, as a country director, as a head of mission, and as a technical advisor. And my experience is so clear that the impact of a technical advisor without the backing of the leadership is so limited as to be negligible. What we need is feminist leadership and feminist advisors, not gender experts. The problem with that is, why I'm saying that, is that gender experts who are de-linked from feminist politics, who bring about an apolitical, technocratic, liberal approach towards equality and extend gender to mean all forms of violence with a gender basis without differentiating the systemic structural violence against women. This does more harm than good and pushes the feminist cause backwards. So in my view, feminist leadership must be at the top of organizations and in the management at every level, and must drive humanitarian action taken by international actors. We need a feminist humanitarian system, and this will only be accomplished through uncompromising feminist leadership, both within international organizations and beyond them. Leadership must be bold, they must be ready to take up new ways of working, and what I mean by that is relinquishing old mandates, relinquishing old strategies, and most importantly, relinquishing power.
Super.
And
Thank you
I'll
so much.
stop there.
Thank you, Anu, and thank you for those very concrete suggestions on the way forward. I think, you know, really that issue of having feminist leadership and being open to transform and change and giving up power is one of those points that we really need to consider for humanitarian organizations if we want to have real gender transformative change. We have some time for questions. At the beginning, I was going to ask people to put their questions in the chat, but given that we had all these technical problems, if there were any, I might have lost some. But I see Cindy Clark, you had a question. I don't know if you had a question or if that was the general one around the audio. But if you had a question, Cindy, do you want to ask? Or if anybody else has a question, please either put it in the Q&A or raise your hand if you can find that function. And hopefully I will be able to see it. Cindy, did you have a question? Are you able to speak? Is it a different issue? Technology? I'm going to guess not then.
I have a question if no one else
Please.
has a question.
I don't see any other ones. If somebody else sees somebody with their hand up, please help me.
Just to kickstart the questions, you know, maybe some people are shy.
Please do. We only have 8 minutes, so hopefully it's an easy question.
Okay, great conversation, colleagues. Fantastic. I'm very interested in this whole idea of how do we give up power, right? Because a lot of our humanitarian organizations are based on power and disparities, and we kind of feed off that in some way. So how do we start to say, hey, let's not do this anymore? I think it sounds great in theory, but I would really love for us to really talk more concretely in terms of, you know, what do I need to do now, going back to my organization, for example, to make it more feminist informed? Or what does, you know, WRC need to do? And of course, you're already in that process. But it would be great for the participants in, you know, on the call to then take back something to their organization to say, here's how we relinquish power. You know, this is what we need to do. It would be great to hear, because I'm loving this idea of challenging power.
Super, April. Thank you. And I've got Deanne, you've got your hand up as well. So I'll come to you and see if we've got a couple of questions. Before I go to Deanne, I just saw a question and it disappeared. I'll let you go, Deanne, and I'll try to find that question back that popped up, please. Hopefully you'll be able to get the floor. Can we let Deanne speak? Is she able to? Somebody on the technical side?
Manisha, do you hear me?
I hear you now, Deanne. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry. I'm sorry you guys are having technical issues today, since this is such an important topic. So this is Diane Goulet from the United States Mission. Really appreciate the interventions by the panelists and the questions around, especially, you know, how we can make a gender transformative change within the system. I think that some of the points that were already raised, reflecting internally each of us, so including both the international organizations, NGOs, as well as donors, I think that's very pertinent. And as April just mentioned, you know, the importance of looking really concretely into what each of us can do is going to be essential moving forward. So linked to that, I think it's interesting if the panelists have a reflection on if you think that this kind of conversation is happening at the mid and senior levels of the organization. So it's great to have these conversations internally with those who are interested in this topic, and all should be interested in this topic, but I don't think we're there yet. So I would be interested in hearing if you feel like this conversation, if you think this conversation and these issues are being discussed at those higher levels, and or at least if there are echoes of these conversations. So that's my first question. I also appreciated the comment on leveraging the change right now in COVID, and I think that that's also critical, that we're at a special time and we need to take it up, and perhaps this is, you know, these kinds of societal disruptions are a very enriching opportunity to be able to do change in other ways. And then I did have a couple of concrete reflections or feedback that I wanted to pass back from Washington. And this was very specific to the IAHE evaluation on gender equality and empowerment. And that was the support for GenCap. It was noted in the evaluation that this is essential to realizing the objectives, both operationally and strategically. And so we did want to note that while it's important to welcome new donors to support GenCap and ProCap, for example, that as a system, it's important for longstanding donors to continue their support of these kinds of initiatives so that we can have those people on the ground that are really critical members of the community to provide the direction for the teams in the field and to really think about gender equality in everything that is happening. And then another thing that was reflected by my Washington colleagues was the interest in having an institutional review and accompanying management response. So again, bringing really the top leaders and mid-level leaders of organizations to do a review and create an action plan on the topic of gender transformative change and fit for purpose. So we think that would really be something that could be useful, and we would be supportive of such an endeavor. And then lastly, just looking at the critical role of OCHA as the organization that is very much the one in charge of coordinating the broader humanitarian system. So seeing what their role is and pushing forward on gender equality as they have been doing, as evident in their new policy paper and action plan, but just continuing that conversation and really going further in that space. So apologies, I took a long time. There was a lot to say there, but again, appreciate this conversation and looking forward to the other two discussions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think there's a lot of questions there. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to them all since we've only got 2 minutes. And I also see a number of other questions. And I know someone else has their hand up, but I'm going to ask if you could just drop your question into the chat box so I can read them off and then hand back to our panelists. I apologize, given our lack of time. We had a question very similar to what Diane just asked about how do you foresee working with executives of UN agencies on adapting feminist approaches in leadership? And how do you foresee gender transformational change through changing roles in agencies and integrating more people-centered approaches? And then we have a couple of others. 1 second, I have lost my chat box. What advice might you have for employees of donor countries who want to contribute to decolonizing aid but don't have support from leaders in their organizations? And how can women with disabilities benefit from this awesome event and ideas shared? And I think that we can definitely follow up on. As a follow-up, we will have a note. But that's a lot of questions for all of you. In 1 minute, I'm going to give you each 1 minute because we've only got a minute left. I let you choose which one of those you want to address, but then know that if you don't answer them all, we have 2 more dialogues where we can address some of these questions. And then also, if you have any concrete ideas on more feminist and localized approaches to humanitarian funding, since we know local organizations are severely excluded from the current system. Thank you, Agnieszka. Who wants to go first? Leslie, you're free to come in as well. Anila, please.
Anya, I'd like to answer the question which Diana asked about how to make sure, or if is there any happening. I think yes, there are so many debates are happening globally. There are so many reforms. We are talking about SDGs. We are talking about global compact of migration, global compact of refugees, and so many debates are happening. But what's happening actually? These debates are still happening in a so much high level. You know, and we are feeling some it's like we as a migrant and refugees or people on the ground, and he will having this some kind of disconnection. And to reach on this debate, we need allies from our internationals, NGOs. Otherwise, we are not able to directly intervene because it requires your energy, your resources to be entered in this kind of level of discussion. So yeah, there's a long way to go, but yes, this discussion are happening to make sure this discussion goes in the right direction, to make sure we get more outcomes, and to translate these policies recommendation into the practice. It requires long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anila. Marta, please, and then I'll give the floor to you.
Oh, thank you, because I have another presentation. There's so many interesting questions, but I want to concretely ask one. I think a lot is asked of the local NGOs, a lot. When we have to present a proposal, when we have to carry out work on the field, I think we have to move from just being executors of programs or projects and resources to become allies. And I think you have at the UN level and all these agencies, amazing agencies that work and have this mandate, you have to start implementing within yourself these performance evaluations that evaluate the leadership competences. What leaders do you have? What is their commitment, and a proven commitment through actual facts, you know? And I think sometimes to talk about performance evaluations is kind of scary, because some people think that they are meant to say everything that you are not doing right. But I think it's a starting point in order to start learning how to do things better and more connected with what our missions are. So I think that is one of the best practices that we have, and that really help us achieve all the leadership competences that are needed, especially needed in the work that we do.
Super, thank you, Marta, and apologies for making you late for your next one. Anu, please.
Thanks, Manisha. I just thought that there were really good questions there, and struggled to find one that I could just quickly answer. But I think I'm going to go with the, what can we do? You know, what is it that we can do right now? I think April asked, and Anna, said something about that as well. Is I think that one of the things about shifting power and change and relinquishing power is about resourcing frontline responders who are mainly women. And we've seen this in the COVID response, how women have stepped up and how local communities and community-based organizations have stepped up to the challenge of responding, which is what they always do, but they don't get seen. So it's about putting resources and power back into the hands of the local responders, particularly women's organizations, women-led organizations. But I think in terms of gender, I made the point about gender expertise and how damaging it is when the gender expertise is de-linked from feminist politics. And I think that what is also very damaging is this fly-in, fly-out, parachuting gender experts into emergencies. This is completely not a sustainable way of ensuring that there is some effort being made for gender transformation to actually happen, for feminist ways of working to be entrenched into the operation. So I think if looking at, should we continue to be funding capacities like GenCap and ProCap, and I'm talking from my own experience as a former GenCap, I would say funding them with conditions that this is not done in an apolitical way, that it's done in a gender transformative way, and in a sustainable way, that there's sustainable support given to the operations to actually work in a way that responds to the needs for transformation from a feminist perspective.
Super, thank you so much, Anu. Ambassador Norton, did you want to come in before I try to wrap up? I'm guessing not. Anyway.
No, sorry. Hi, Manisha. I just want to say thanks very much. I've been listening and enjoying the conversation, but I don't want to take any time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sorry. Huge thanks to all of you. I know we haven't been able to get into the meat of a lot of the questions that were there, but this is the first of two dialogues. I think our panel today has been excellent at identifying where some of the challenges are for humanitarian organizations, how we need to really start to shift power and move that power to those who have not been having that power or been able to hold that power. We've got organizations that are rooted in deep histories. We need to be thinking about how we change those dynamics. Organizations really need to be taking internal reflections, trying to really think about how does leadership work? How do they engage with those they work with? And it does take time and investment, and it's not going to be an easy process, but there is that necessity to really move forward if we want to have real gender transformational change. And I think the point about the conversation is often happening at the mid to senior levels, but not at the executive levels in a serious manner is where we really need to elevate the conversation. And I think the interagency humanitarian evaluation and the WRC paper, as well as many other things out there, are starting those conversations and really helping to push us forward. But it is going to take some sustained pressure to make sure that those recommendations and those very honest and difficult conversations do take place within humanitarian organizations, because we've not been able to do the work necessary for long enough. Huge thanks to everyone on our panel, and apologies again for the technical challenges and for going over time because of that. Please join us for the second dialogue, which will be sometime in the autumn. We will share something for that. We'll try and share the recording. Hopefully it worked, as well as a short note from this event. And you're invited to another event next Friday on the same platform. So hopefully the technical issues will be sorted out by then, on disrupting power and organizational culture, taking gender equality and women's empowerment beyond protection, that the Gender Reference Group of the ISC is hosting next Friday at the same time at Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Week. Huge thanks to everybody, and I wish you all a lovely Friday and a lovely weekend. Thank you all.